Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has said that India is confident that the proposed first tranche of the bilateral trade agreement with the US will be finalized by November this year. To talk more on this, I have with me leading economist and member of NITI Aayog, Dr. Arvind Virmani. Welcome to NDTV. First question, of course, revolves around the broad contours of what is being negotiated now between India and the US. We do know that you have done assessment of how India stands to benefit from BTA. What is your first reaction to the fact that now talks seems to be back on table and Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump are also now going to talk about this issue very soon?
So very quickly, let me, because the word first tranche you have used, let me very briefly tell you what the overall is and what. So basically in trade, we have goods and services. And then trade in modern goods is closely linked to investment. So trade and investment in the goods field are kind of very closely linked, which is why we talk about supply chains and etc. So generally, different FTAs can have different, but the phrase first tranche has broadly become, that doesn't mean other things will not be considered, but broadly focusing on the goods trade and the investment linkages. Now this is important because one of our objectives is Atmanirbhar and high income country by 1947.
Developed country.
Developed country by 2040. Well, I would call high income because develop again is very complicated. We can call it that. Okay. That means, and part of that is that at least in the next 10-15 years, we are going to raise our share of manufacturing in value added. So that is why this particular part of an FTA becomes very important, because we have a goal. We have a goal of becoming developed or high income, and then the trade and investment treaties are going to play an important role. And very quickly, to give you the background, we have signed treaties with Australia, UK, we are discussing with EU, and as the Honourable Minister has said in several places in the last week or two, we are discussing with New Zealand. We also signed the European, I always forget that, EFTA countries, Switzerland, etc. So this is going to play a very important role in making manufacturing grow in our country. And what is the reason for that is because the EU and US are the two largest importers of manufactured goods in the world. So if you think of a global market for anybody, it is very important to have a presence, so to say, or be able to export to USA and EU. And that is why the FTAs with both these countries are very important.
Very important. But coming to the specific sectors, a Trade Watch quarterly report was released by NITI Aayog, and there were certain sectors that you've been talking about that needs to be the focus. First, of course, IT, financial services, professional services, improved visa access for Indian professionals, etc. What do you think should be the primary focus of the first tranche, in your view? I mean, that will.
So I think perhaps you missed the point I made. To my knowledge, I do not know what the negotiations are, but I am going by the earlier FTAs and the statements made by various parties. And the critical thing at this point for especially the EU and USA from our perspective is to ensure that the supply chains for complex network products like electronics. You will recall that we have put a lot of emphasis on mobile phones and the supply chains which go with that. Okay, we have put a lot of emphasis on semiconductors. So the supply chains for computer processing, telecom, these are very important elements of this growth of manufacturing which we aim to happen. And therefore, the free, easy movement of goods back and forth, that is the key. When we talk about supply chain, these supply chains of these complex products are not linear. मतलब वो एक प्रोडक्ट दूसरा ऐसे लिनियर नहीं चलती, ये कॉम्प्लेक्स होती है. एक प्रोडक्ट यहाँ बन, आई मीन द प्रोडक्ट इज मेड हियर, गोज समवेयर, कम्स बैक. सो दीज FTAs ensure, for example, if one could have zero tariffs, then these products can move quickly and efficiently, and that gives you competitive advantage. Okay? So that is why the part of the manufacturing supply chains are so critical from our perspective.
Right. But do you think that this, of course, will then have a multiplier effect on
Absolutely.
on us?
So, conventionally, if we look at structural change across the world, for the last 75 years, post-war era, always there is a movement from agriculture to manufacturing to services. In our case, this has been kind of, I wouldn't say diverted, but not as much as has happened in other states. So, the manufacturing sector plateaued out in India. And one of the reasons is that other countries during the 70s, 80s, 90s got into these supply chains. Again, with some with USA, some with EU. So now that we have to do it very quickly after supply chains have moved, for example, to Vietnam, etc., we have to have these FTAs to make that happen quickly. Okay, so that is the big importance of both these FTAs to ensure that the supply chains are competitive in India, and therefore the multinationals located in US and EU. We've already seen one example.
Right.
These examples could be multiplied like 10 times, 100 times. You've already seen this happen in mobiles, in Apple. But that is just one case. There could be 10 companies, 100 companies.
And that's what I think the Prime Minister also said
Yeah.
when he responded to Donald Trump's statement on Truth Social, where he says, I'm confident that our trade negotiations will pave the way for what he calls the unlocking the limitless potential of India-US partnerships. You are saying that
so I
huge
gave,
potential.
yes, I gave one side of it, but why is it important for the US and EU? It's that in many of these products, China has an almost virtual monopoly, one could say.
Okay.
So they need to have competitive products. You cannot, this is a general thing. It's not just a matter of China. No country or group of countries can afford to be solely dependent on one country, whatever that country is, right? So it's very important to develop alternative competitive supply chains in these products. Okay, so that is the gain to them. They will have competitive products. They'll get better prices, cheaper. All the benefits they also get of competition. And their companies will have freedom, and that's the extra advantage, that we do not control things. They are welcome to produce whatever they feel. We will create the competitive environment. We will not force them to do anything like transfer technology or force thing, which they may be feeling is happening in China.
It has to be mutual kind of a...
So what I'm saying is that is the extra benefit of the fact of diversifying out of China, because there have been complaints by many companies that they were forced to transfer technology to Chinese companies. We will not do that. So they will be more welcome and feel welcomed here, and therefore be more profitable from the US and EU perspective.
That's right. So the proposed BTA then
So
will...
that is where the mutual benefit comes in.
Right. So one last question on this tariff issue. So that essentially means that this proposed first tranche of the BTA and the subsequent parts of the BTA will restructure the larger contours of India-US economic relations.
Absolutely.
And in turn will also change the contours of the global trade. In the
Yes,
sense
once
China,
they are successful,
Right.
say in 10 years time, because obviously it takes time, right? So in 10, 15 years, the second part, like what I said, the competitive supply chains will be there. So the whole world will benefit from that. It's always good. Competition is good for the buyer. So from their perspective, if we compete with China or other countries, they get better products, cheaper products.
And it helps make India the global manufacturing hub.
Now we are going back to the India side, right, which I already said.
Okay.
That will obviously have to happen. No, we'll be able to build our scale and be more efficient.
Scale of production.
Competitiveness.
So one important development in this context has happened with regard to the GST 2, what is called the next generation of reforms. Lots of restructuring. You have been saying that the GST system has to be reformed. Now that finally has happened.
Yeah.
And industry has welcomed, and common people, of course, will start getting benefits from 22nd September. What is your assessment of how this rate rationalization of the GST will actually help the economy? I mean, as an economist, what is the NITI Aayog's assessment?
So there are basically three elements of the benefit, and let me just give you one by one, and then we can explore other aspects. So basically, the first element is going to be, we in the last few interviews you have had with me, we've talked about how urban consumption share is low. There have been complaints that is not growing as fast. So one of the key things which will happen is that is going to get back to normal. It will help quickly. We have been waiting. I have myself said it will gradually come back. But what this will ensure is that it happens much more quickly. So one is the consumption will be restored to pre-pandemic levels in a way, right? Because that has been one of the complaints, that the consumption levels shares are lower than in the past. So the first effect is consumption, and it is normalization. That's an important point to benefit. It's not inflationary, because it's just getting back to normal. So it will speed up that process. So positive consumption effect on private consumption. The second one is the investment. So as the consumption increases, investors have been waiting. Capacity utilization will again also be restored to reasonable levels, which perhaps was lacking because of the, earlier it was rural consumption was a complaint, then it was urban. So by and large, consumption has been somewhat below the pre-levels. The share, everything is growing. Growth is going on, but the share. So this will then investment will also pick up in the areas where this slowness was perceived. For example, in consumer durables like cars, in semi-durables, what we call household equipment, etc. So all these areas, as the capacity utilization increases, the investment will also pick up in these areas.
Interesting. So then this has a multiplier effect.
That's right. So the time period is sequential in a way, not sequential, but the consumption effect will happen within 6 months or so. The investment effect may take a little longer, 12 months plus, right? And then finally, the most important, which why economists keep talking about the long-term effects, is the simplification reduces cost of doing business, and that has slowly but steadily will have big effects on productivity and long-term growth. So, which is what drives economists like me. I've been, as you mentioned, I have written so many papers on GST reform. So compliance increases, the elasticity of tax revenue increases, and it is more efficient in terms of the productive system.
So how will it push up the GDP then? Because if
all three.
All three will
there is just that the phasing and lags are different.
Any assessment of
how much I said 6 months in the first the consumption, then the investment, and these effects happen slowly. The last one, which I said, the productivity, you don't see it. When I did a evaluation of the 91 reforms, what I found was that productivity effects appeared in a year or so. So it depends. They are very hard to predict. Okay. So the productivity effects will happen more slowly, but they will be the most sustaining. They will
SBI chairman has said that it will lead to.
Now you are asking about the growth impact.
And inflation,
See,
any assessment, how much?
I deal with the real world. Inflation is much more complicated. It depends on monetary policy, fiscal. I don't think we have time to get into all. Just taking.
But on GDP, what is the assessment?
So GDP definitely. It means that again, last time, if you remember, we discussed. I stuck with my forecast of 6.5%, and the uncertainty had created a bigger band. Now I'm again given these, both the negative effects of the tariff changes, etc., and these positive effects. I'm now back to being confident of a 6.5 plus minus growth rate.
6.5%.
Yeah. So that was my original forecast. I was wavering over, with the tariffs and all, but now I'm reasonably confident that will happen. Of course, there's always a band, because still a lot of uncertainty in the world, right? When the FTAs will happen, etc., etc. But with I would say 0.5 plus minus band around 6.5.
But how much will this push the GDP?
देखिए, there are different estimates. The point is there are negative effects of the tariffs. We know that. You were only telling me that XYZ is saying orders have gone down by such and such, etc. So there will be negative effects of that. There will be positive effects of this.
But
so
on the GST rate,
there's another factor which is in play. So GDP is not just what we do, right? There's oil prices. Oil prices are softer. So that will have an effect. So all these things together, I'm saying we will. It's a good. I think I'm fairly confident that we'll get around 6.5%.
Thank you very much for talking to NDTV. So in NITI Aayog, with my camera colleague Shiv Tiwari, Himanshu, Shekhar for NDTV.